Hi everybody, it's Kadzo with Kadzoe for Africa, and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to share with you a story, and I'm already stumbling because it's actually a personal story. And it is a story about me trying to find my ancestry. I'll get right to it because this is, wow, I don't even know where to begin, but I always have conversations with my father. He's a very intelligent man, and I always love to check in with him and find out how he's doing. And this one time I actually reached out to him because I had wanted to know some things about my family. And I found out, it's so interesting. Every time you speak to your parents about where you come from, you find out different types of information. And so I found out that my grandmother on my mother's side of my family actually lived, and I did not know, very close to a tribe in my country, a tribe very popular in East Africa called the Maasai. And I remember my heart was just like, oh my gosh, I was so surprised because I just never thought about it. And so anyway, to make a long story short, my father had mentioned to me that he had asked about my mother's past. And by talking to some relatives on my mother's side of the family, he came to the realization that possibly that my family could have Maasai blood. And the Maasai are actually the tribe in my country. You've heard of the ones that their initiation is actually to kill lions as their rite of passage. And so there's an element of pride to be associated with such a wonderful group of people in East Africa. So that is actually still in progress. And I called my mother, and my mother put me in touch with her uncle, who is my great grand uncle, my grandmother's brother. And as I do this video, I'm still in the search because trying to find out about who I am and find out about myself a little bit more. And so it's interesting because in this video, I also, in that same conversation with my father, realized that I am more connected with African American history than I thought. I have such a deep love and respect for the African American people as an African woman. And what I found out was actually in relation to the slave trade. Growing up, we had to take African history, and the slave trade is a part of African history because our people were taken without their willingness. They were kidnapped and taken to the New World, which is what we now call the West. And we learned a lot about the slave trade being predominantly in Western Africa, which is associated with the Dahomey and Ashanti. These are West African kingdoms, and they would transport them through the Atlantic Ocean. And so being from the eastern part of Africa, closer by the Indian Ocean, I actually wasn't aware about the history of African American slavery through the East African perspective. And so in this video today, I'm going to share with you a little bit of that so that you can find a motivation in this story as well. So if you are African American watching this video, I know that you will find a lot of encouragement. And if you are international and are curious about the minority African American experience, then this story will be actually riveting. So just to make sure that I didn't forget anything, I wrote down what my dad had actually told me. So I'm going to be referring as I talk a little bit about this history. And so in East Africa, we do have a country called Zanzibar. And one of the things that I learned about in relation to East Africa and African American history, guys, is that Zanzibar actually means black market. The word Zanzibar means black market. And I just, Zanze means market and Ba means black. So literally when they talk about slavery being a part of the people, just brought shivers to me because I've always said Zanzibar, Zanzibar, and I didn't know Zanzibar means black market. Like that's where we were sold as Africans to the Western world, was in Zanzibar. And I also came to find out some other things that really, guys, just floored me. I did find out that and I should have known this because I speak Swahili, and it's very interesting when you hear about these places. But there is a place about 3 hours away from where my grandmother lives in the coastal part of Kenya in East Africa, and it's called Shimoni. And I can't tell you how many times I've been to Shimoni. They have scuba diving there, they have resorts, they have anybody who's interested in the wildlife. And Shimoni is actually the place where they kept Africans on their way to the New World. So there is actually a monument there for the Africans or the ancestors of African Americans that were taken from the inland areas. So the inland part of the country were taken to the coast by the Arabs, and they were put in Shimoni. And this is 3 hours away from where my grandmother lives. And I always knew Shimoni, and Shimoni in Swahili in my language means whole. I just was so flawed, and I all of a sudden I was on YouTube, and I actually do have a video about Shimoni. So it's, if you are interested in it, you can actually click on it, and that's where they kept slaves before they took them through the Indian Ocean, and they would take them to Arabia, and they would take them to the Americas, and then they would transport them because it was a trade, so they would transport them all over. But this is where they kept Africans from the inlands. And I think a lot of you already know that one of the reasons why the slaves couldn't escape was because these are Africans from different tribes, different parts, never met each other, don't know about each other. They were kidnapped, they were lied to about opportunities, trade by the Arabs, and then they were taken together and chained and in this place. So I just was floored that no longer then was it just a West African thing. It's actually in my backyard, and it's just wow. My dad also let me know a couple of things as well. So there is actually a town in the city where my dad was born, in Mombasa. There is a town actually called Freetown. Freetown is what we call it. Guys, it literally is Freetown. This is the place where kidnapped Africans who were saved from slavery were taken. And so these are Africans taken from different parts of Africa. And it's literally like 30 minutes from where my grandma lives, and so I'm definitely going to visit this place too. It's called Freetown. My dad's friend who worked with him in media was actually from Freetown. He was a Malawian descent. He came from West Africa, and his family, was saved. And so because they didn't know how to get back and didn't quite get back, Freetown was established. So Freetown is actually a town for freed slaves. It's still there right now. So this is what I learned from this experience, was that this is just not a West African Dahomey Ashanti thing, which is what I predominantly thought, was that a lot of slaves were taken through the Atlantic Ocean, and everybody knows that Liberia was actually created of this freed slaves. I learned through my dad the other day that right in my back door, there is a story to tell. And I'll wrap this up by sharing with any African American watching this video that many of the folks from the West, African Americans, Caucasian Americans, the Brits, Australians, who have visited Shimoni, just to be able to go there and understand African American history, that has caused the people of that town to be able to go to school and be educated. So out of something really evil, there's good coming out of many, many years later of us remembering what happened to our fellow Africans before they were taken to the West. So remember, guys, like I always say, life is full of opportunities, and education is really the key to success. That is the very reason that I found out the information that I did today.